And we're recording. Excellent. Today, I'm very excited. I've got the great and powerful Wil Brown with me. Welcome, Wil.
Thank you, mate. Good morning.
It is morning. I'm quite bleary-eyed because I think I woke up about 5 times. You know when you got to be up slightly earlier and you wake up like a few times? I woke up 5 times last night. No joke, because I was like, they have that kind of worry that you're gonna miss something. I had my alarm on, but yeah.
Another feeling all too well.
Yeah, it was like 4 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock. It was
Bless you.
Awful. Anyway, we're here now. This is Parkour Coach Companion with me, Sam Kopak, and we are now on episode 19. If you are listening to this on Spotify, you can come over and watch us on YouTube. Just type in Parkour Coach Companion, and you can watch us talk. Likewise, if you're on YouTube, come over to Spotify. If you just want to listen, just want to put your phone down somewhere and do some cooking, or if you're traveling somewhere, then you can do that hands-free. So yeah, welcome, Wil. Thank you very much for coming on. I know Wil not that much actually, so I'm quite interested to finally have him here in my grasp. We both are part of Flynn Disney's online exploration group, which has been a real interesting dive into all things movement and movement values and principles. So we'll hopefully get into some of that as well. But yeah, firstly, Wil, I noticed that your website is called Figuring It Out, right?
Figuring things out, yes.
Figuring things out, yeah. And so what is Wil trying to figure out? What's the where did that stem from?
I guess the name is to be ambiguous as possible, because I really disliked the idea to box myself in too much. If I was going to, let's say, create some kind of public platform, you could say a public space, I didn't want it to be, I only do this, because my main orientation has always been, I'd say, somewhat to do with learning or pushing myself into new experiences, really kind of, you could say, energize life through experiences. And through a physical practice, this has really helped me to kind of connect with other people and really dive into these kind of like, new experiences of new people and really learn from that and really invigorate my life. And this is something I'm really passionate about, is really seeing these practices as ways to really dive into myself, my own life, gain new and novel experiences and new and novel ways of looking at things of the world. And then you briefly mentioned obviously Flynn's online group, and that's a perfect way to say that this is kind of some of the things that Flynn's sharing there is a great example of that. Is like first principles thinking, going back to rather than taking on the idea of if I was maybe born like you, I probably could do that, rather than saying what's actually in front of me and what can I actually do. And I think through my previous experiences and meeting some quite amazing people, I've slowly kind of gained this awareness of there's so many things that are actually possible to everyone with a sense of practice and figuring things out. And then for me, that's where it came from, like I can really figure things out for myself, or at least standing on the shoulders of giants and those around me is like it's a really great thing. And in combination with I don't want to only do X for the rest of my life, I want to also have this open and this bunch of work lead into other works and other things, and maybe even, for example, the topic of learning is very, very vast and very applicable to humans in general in life. And I think just to have that as an orientation, or one of my orientations, is really valuable, both for me and I hope for the world.
I know that you are currently, how long have you been you do online coaching? And it's kind of more, obviously this is a parkour podcast, but your primary realm is like the movement culture realm, right?
Somewhat. I'd say I'm definitely trying to carve my own way through, and trying to individuate as much as possible, now more than ever. But yeah, I've definitely been highly influenced by various cultures, movement culture being one of them over the years, and I think maybe going by one of my, I reflect a lot on kind of why I do certain things and what draws me into certain practices, and one of them really is, like we spoke about the other day, I'm really oriented to people, and I really love being around people. My childhood was always team sports, and through university in my late teens, I was always in team sport, and I was very much oriented towards, okay, I want to be with other people, and so I was always drawn to travel, meet other people, and I've kind of lost my thread here now. There's a reason why I said that.
That's all right.
What was the original question, sorry?
So, as in your online coaching and being part of movement culture.
Yes, right. Yeah, so then I think I was always kind of quite good at soaking up information from other people because I was oriented towards being with them. So a lot of the initial sparks as to what I was learning, for example, the handstand, was very much a kind of circumstantial thing of I met someone that was very good at hand balancing, and then I kind of soaked up all that knowledge and was like, wow, this is great. Got slightly obsessed with both the practice and also spending time with these people that were amazing at doing hand balancing. From there, gained enough skill to then move on and do the next thing, and then kind of thought, okay, well, this has served its purpose, I really enjoyed learning this, but I want to now next thing. And it was always this case of, okay, well, what's the next bunch of people that are interesting that I can soak up knowledge from, and I would say without realizing that was somewhat of an orientation I took. Obviously, it's not as simple as that in reality, but that's very much what I see now.
And so that's interesting that you feel like you're kind of carving your own path through movement then. Movement is the baseline of what you love and what you do, but you're not necessarily tied to this culture or this culture. You're kind of trying to find your own understanding of what you can do. I've seen that through your videos. I was watching some of your videos last night. It was interesting, your feelings about physical intelligence and these ideas of very, very much the individual. Mm-hmm. Did you find that was kind of a bit of a breakaway philosophy from when you were originally into like team sports and stuff? Do you kind of now?
I'm really trying to make it so. I think one early influence was Marcello, Palazzo. I had some coaching from him, and then he really pushed me towards creating a personal philosophy. So really sitting down and taking some time to really decide, okay, well, what do I really see here? And then when I make decisions coaching or in my own practice, it's really based on something fundamentally considered, let's say, from my perspective, from my point of view. And this was really useful because I can then say, okay, well, I really think this is what I see. This is what I'm orienting towards, and this is the steps I need to take to get there. And I think alongside kind of my design background at university and how my mind works, this kind of like, you could say step-by-step kind of process really, really, really suits me in like how I see things, or how I easily see things. So I definitely think, this kind of philosophy making is a really useful one. And then that led me to this idea of, okay, well, what is this kind of orientation? Because I don't believe in for example, Ido's perspective necessarily. I don't think that what he's saying is truly resonating with me, in the sense of he purely moves to move. He purely moves for the movement itself, and I think that's not for me what I truly move for. I think that's a nice way to look at it, and it's useful, and there's some value there. But I think we all have individual desires and drives as to why we do certain things, and that also comes from a multitude of things, like your past experiences, your where you feel safe. For example, this is a good topic from the group. If you're safe, then you're probably self-confident to do certain things, and this allows you some kind of space to then express yourself in new ways. And I think in my work in different fields. Like my teacher right now is Tom Wexler, who's amazing, really amazing thinker and mover, and really impacted my way in a lot of ways. But learning from these people that are kind of outside of this kind of central culture really helps me to kind of take a look at the elephant from a new way, if you can get the metaphor. Like I really love this metaphor of kind of the blind man meet the elephant. And again, this kind of then comes back to this figuring things out philosophy of, I don't want to just take what the loudest voice says, let's say. I want to also take what I find to be the case, and this is what I'm trying to do slowly.
Nice. I have mixed feelings on Ido, and a lot of them very good. But I also understand when, for example, my good friend Chris Scott, who hopefully will come on here one day if you're listening, Chris. Chris is an exceptional intellect in sort of strength building world, and really knows his shit, really more than most people I've ever met. But Chris is very, very like pragmatic, so he finds Ido's kind of long, mysterious, kind of mystical ways of talking and writing. He hasn't met him in person, so that's something to consider. But he finds this mysticism actually not as useful as it could, like, as in Ido is doing himself a disservice by being too mystical, being too kind of esoteric. And I wonder what you thought on that, because I know that movement culture, it does involve figures like Ido, and it does involve kind of, you could say, esoteric language. And I wonder what your thoughts on that are, because obviously movement and movement culture and the way we try and express ourselves is hard. You can't like, it's hard to explain the sensation of, the way you do something. It's hard to explain to someone why you're moving around on the floor in a certain way and what it gives you. So I kind of have sympathy for people like Ido as well, because do you see what I mean?
Of course, yeah. I have it's a really nice point, and I very much can see where it comes from. I actually know Chris. We're both from Coventry, so we have there's a good link there. Yeah. I think if you're thinking of the same Chris Scott that I'm thinking of,
absolutely, yeah.
So we have a connection there. So I know exactly what you're talking about. So I actually watched a really wonderful video yesterday by a guy called Matthias Meyer. The video is titled ABC to Poetry.
Yes, yeah.
And it's a really fantastic way of looking at kind of what we can't quite explain, and this is a perfect example of this. So I think Chris's methods are very much like the bare bones, and he wants to be very pragmatic and very kind of conscientious, and then like, this is what it is, and this is what it isn't. I really value this of Chris. On the other side of things, Ido is the kind of like the poetic side of things, where it's like, it is this, but it's also this because like this, and I don't think either one is inherently bad. What I would say is this: the reason why Ido's been so popular is I believe he's one of the best people in the culture at making a belief system, creating a belief system. So people truly believe in what he's doing, what he says, and that is in part coming from the language he uses. Because humans are inherently kind of emotional beings, right? We're very socially oriented. We're very kind of like, we derive meaning from many things, but language is one of them. And the way Ido uses language is hugely influential on who believes in him and what they believe about him. And I think in turn, that then generates this passion for a practice that maybe the individual wouldn't have gone towards in the first place, but because they've now had this inspiration, this belief in this guy's system, whoa, okay, this is actually something I believe in now. But they didn't think of it that themselves necessarily, and I think this is why maybe Chris or anyone going down the kind of like Flynn, to reference Flynn again. We live together, so it's really hard not to reference Flynn.
Oh, go ahead.
He kind of says, you know, a lot of physicists derive life down to its, like, let's say, smallest parts, as like we're all based upon atoms, and this is kind of the ABC side of the scale. But he says it's more to do with like life's made up of meaning, you could say, and we go through life from like the smallest points as meaning, let's say. He's going to hate me for bastardizing what he said, probably what he didn't at all. But anyway, the point is, if we only focus on the atoms and the things that are kind of cold, hard, binary things, we don't really have life there. We have kind of the building blocks of life. And as we all kind of know, the life is far more complex and far more vibrant or interesting than just the bare bones. And I think this is a really valuable point here, because I really respect Tito. I got obviously huge inspiration from him growing up when I was younger and meeting him doing certain things. It's like had a lot of positives there, and one of those probably the main reason why that I could think of was because he made me believe in something bigger than what was there already. And this is, I think, the same as Danny Ilabaca, for example. He had some amazing thoughts in the past that I'm being enlightened to more recently. Same kind of figure, you know. He wasn't talking in the ABCs. He was talking in the poetic language that really created people, created some sense of belief system for people. And I think this is huge for these figures.
That's so interesting, man. Yeah, that's some interesting words you've used in there, like belief system and things like this. But then I totally get you, because it's a bit similar to a book I was reading on coaching I think it's called The Language of Coaching. And it explains how if you give someone an internal cue, as in like move your elbow in this way, apparently studies showing that external cues are much more memorable and much more useful for people to learn. So rather than saying move your elbow in this way, you could say smash through some glass, you know, smash the elbow through glass. And it's kind of like, I think we're kind of it reminds me of the conversation you just had about things, using our words to expand the size of a thing in a way, like in our minds. And it's kind of like, yeah, why do kids like the floor is lava? Because suddenly the floor is bigger than just the floor, it's lava. And it's really interesting, yeah, that you mentioned Daniel Ilabaca as well. And man, I envy you that you're just kind of getting into that world, because Daniel Ilabaca for me is probably as close as I can say to an idol as anyone that I know, really. And you're absolutely right. It's because of the words that he used, and because of that set him apart from a lot of people. The words made my brain kind of bubble, kind of made them.
Well, this is where the idea of poetry is quite useful, that Matthias was saying, is because the reason why he said it was so, that the ultimate level of spoken language, is because it gets a lot of information, a lot of imagery, let's say, across in a very short sentence or piece of text. Something that maybe a essay doesn't. It's a huge body of text, lots of stuff to take in, lots of information to get a point across. And so I think this is kind of what images do to a much higher extent, to like another level, let's say, or another dimension. It's like images get stuff across that we can comprehend and then dig deeper into. So something I really like to do when I'm teaching is give cues based upon, kind of like you're saying, external, but also imagery. So something that encompasses more information than just focusing on an elbow. Because as we all know, moving, just simply getting up and standing up, walking, running, there is so many things going on. If we as humans consciously then focus on one tiny detail, we miss the vast complexity of the whole picture. But if we can try and create an image that encompasses that single detail, without losing the complexity of the whole picture, then we have a better idea to move forward and actually integrate that and learn from that detail. So if I take, for example, the handstand, so I've taught it a lot, so one of the things I can pull upon quite easily from my mind is this idea of there's many things like a Jenga block stack going on here, and then we kind of have to stack the Jenga blocks in the most efficient way possible. One of the ideas I like to use is the idea of a shirt sleeve. Okay, so you see my shirt sleeve, it's quite ruffled, it's quite loose because there's no tension there. So it's very easily, let's say, it's very easy to move, it's quite wobbly, it's quite loose. So if I'm trying to balance this on something, it would be quite chaotic. But if I now create tension via length, the ruffles go, and there's a sense of continuity there, of structural integrity there. So the image I like to give people is, can you touch your toes to the ceiling? And when I learned the handstand, I literally imagined if this is my toes, the ceiling was like a millimeter away from my toes, and I had to reach. And this length then encompasses details such as, push tall in the shoulder, elongate the spine, posterior pivot, all these details that if you isolate into one go, it's like, narrow focused, too much of a kind of left brain consciousness of I need to do this, and then I forget everything else and I fall over. What happened? And the same thing, like we can relate this to parkour, because obviously it's more relevant for the listeners. If you're trying to think about, I don't know, you're doing a run and you're thinking about one tiny detail of one movement further down the line, you probably miss a step or a foot, or you do something maybe not quite well, and then you're not in the moment. And maybe having some kind of imagery where you're feeling the general kind of shape of the run might help you there, or trying to search for a certain feeling will help you better than thinking of, okay, I need to flex at my hip more. Does that make sense? And so something me and Flynn play with a lot when we're training together is, okay, can we get a certain feeling or a certain image from what we're doing, rather than saying, I think your foot was only partially dorsiflexed. Can you try and 90 degrees more? You know what I mean? It doesn't cut the mustard, let's say. It doesn't get the full complexity.
Yeah, so something that I find interesting in that sense as well with parkour is that I've always been more attracted to this very simple idea of getting from one place to another. And for me, that holds a lot more imagery, you could say, a lot more intrigue than a lot of the more common modern ways of training, which is kind of this lines idea, this kind of like nonsensical geographical kind of roundabout way of moving. Don't get me wrong, it's great. People that do it, I respect, and they're taking it to incredible levels. But it doesn't appeal to me as much. It never has, because for me, the idea of having a place to finish, or like getting to somewhere, like a small adventure from one place to another, has always been that's the bubbling in me, like the child kind of like the intrigue, the adventure and that. And I find that these like kind of competition lines. You do know what I'm talking about, right?
Yes, yes.
I'm not saying like. I think there's a difference between lines and runs. I'm kind of, my preference is like runs, whereas lines are very like competition based language, I guess you could say. Anyway, but you're kind of, in fact, after this conversation, you're going to go and train with Flynn, and I noticed that you've been doing quite a lot of training with him and is it the London Movement Group?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so tell us a bit about that. Tell us a bit about your feelings training parkour, maybe in a similar way to your movement practice, or whether there is any kind of similarities, or whether they're completely different, or how does it affect your mind when you train parkour?
Good bunch of questions there. First of all, I would say the difference between line and run, for me, I have less of an invested interest. I understand what you mean, and I think that the lines are very much, you could say, more towards this kind of free running style, a lot more kind of, like you said, nonsensical. There is no efficiency to A to B. It's very much an expression across A to B, you could say. But I definitely don't see any inherent negativity there. I just think it's not the orientation of the classical efficiency, which isn't my orientation, I would say. Having said that, I would say efficiency doesn't have to be across the space. It could be in the experience itself. So like we've been speaking about, the efficiency could be, can I make all the movements I do feel effortless, easy, or easier than they do? Can the intensity of my experience, of my subjective experience, be low, you know? And so a lot of the stuff that me and Flynn are playing with and that I do also in my dance practices, I move in necessarily quite complex ways, or in certain ways that are from the outside look quite complex or whatever. But I try and make the internal experience not so like this. And I create like space within that movement. So let's say, I don't know, like some kind of like cartwheel variation, let's say. I'm not in a state of fear here. I feel like super calm and comfortable, and so the cartwheel for me, or any of these kind of cartwheels, are very nice, and I feel very open, and I could say in my experience in the cartwheel, there's space for me to then change things. I can go faster or slower, make the cartwheel bigger or smaller. I can have a certain quality in the texture that I'm doing there. Obviously, this is a bit of dance speak, let's say here, but it's also very relevant to parkour. And I think for me, then this parkour style is very much those that have enough space in their movement can then express their own individual style. But that's kind of built upon, first of all, having this level of like safety and self-confidence in what they're doing. And then this sense of kind of, okay, I've got a good enough skill, a good enough tool, let's say toolbox, that I can actually choose different things. And then I have this amazing space within those tools to then express something. And so I think for me, my orientation is far more internal, in the sense of I want to gain a bit more self-awareness via the practices that I'm doing. If that means doing a scary jump and experiencing a level of fear and trying to overcome this, or if it's simply going more towards this idea of expression and the somatic experience, something that Tom, my dance teacher, talks a lot about, is can you focus on the internal experience, the somatic experience, and can you bring this to a level where you can really start to explore that? And then I won't go too much down the dance route, because I know this is the parkour podcast, but then this really resonates with me when I'm doing parkour, because for example right now it's raining, it's pretty bad weather, we're finding like undercover car park spots, and we're still having these amazing sessions. And this comes from this desire to explore a space and kind of have internal space enough to then express certain things and pick certain tools from different fields that I've experienced. And maybe it's some kind of movement that I've picked up from the dance world that I can then add into the parkour work. And it doesn't have to be a bigger, more risky movement. It can be a softer, easier movement that fits really nicely into something, and that gives me a nice experience. And this for me is the far more beneficial for me as an individual, practicing for myself. I'm not practicing to earn money. I'm not practicing to be famous or to as a job necessarily. There's obviously some blurred lines there.
Yeah, it's something that I talked about in the last podcast with Angus, which isn't actually out yet. Oh, this is a bit meta. It's not out yet, but it is out yet. It'll be out afterwards. Anyway, we talked about like this idea of softness in parkour, and how over the years, obviously we've seen a lot of people get injuries from parkour. It's pretty common that people have ankle injuries, knee injuries, wrist injuries, these sort of things. And I've just noticed over time this quite seemingly natural inclination to train in this soft flowing way, because it's lower impact, and because it's partly because people are injured, but partly because people are kind of realizing, maybe if I don't want to get injured again, I should tone things down a little bit. And we're just talking about this, and it's really interesting in what you're saying as well, because I think, there is something really big here about softness and slowness can possibly open up awareness and refinement. And I feel like, yeah, parkour people often are very skilled, very talented, but sometimes neglect this. And this is what I'm so interested in. It's what we're kind of doing with Flynn's group as well, is what you kind of mentioned about, like, opening up space for your own style. So could you go into that a bit more, and about what your kind of project is at the moment about, like, style? Because I think style is a word that we use a lot, but actually it has some real like value to it. So
first of all, I would say I don't quite agree with regards to kind of like only orienting yourself to soft or slowness if you're looking to kind of mitigate injury. I'd say that's kind of what you're doing. I'd say the orientation should be on how you're doing things. Obviously, there's a limit there on either end of this barometer. If you're only doing Dom Tomato style crazy jumps, you're probably on the scale of things more likely to pick up niggles and injuries. But I also don't think you should limit yourself to the other end of the scale of only doing soft and slow things if you're in that state. I still feel like there's a sense of, okay, wherever my level of my skill is, which is completely different for every individual, can I work just a little bit below that and then really try and make my internal experience, like how calm I can be within those movements, a little bit calmer, a little bit maybe more relaxed, a little bit kind of, let's say, how I've been talking, can I create more space internally? And then you don't have to work at the bottom of your limit slow and softly. You can still work in an interesting and, let's say, engaging manner, but it's just with a different orientation, because maybe the orientation of many people when doing, let's say, strides or plyos is like, I need to exert as much force as possible. And maybe it's less about this. Maybe it's about, okay, can I do this stride that I've done 100 times before, but can I really dial into how easy this feels, or how calm I feel here? And then that kind of like internal space would then be, I can now do this and actually breathe in the fresh air as I do it, and notice that and sense that as such. I think this is where style comes in. I'm not necessarily oriented towards being the most stylish. I think style is a little bit of a kind of negatively connotated word, but I think this idea of kind of individual expression maybe is better, or kind of exploring yourself, whatever it might be, or just moving in a way that resonates with you, something like this. It is maybe better. Style kind of has maybe a feeling of kind of external, and I want it to be more like an internal focus of like, okay, once I have this internal environment, the style tends to come out. I'm not trying to push, I want to be like this, I want to do like this. That's already kind of an external drive. You know, it's like, this is what it is, so therefore I must do this. It's kind of like you can say an unspoken expectation or desire. I think for me, the project I'm working on, for example, right now is this idea of like individuation, looking at kind of like what I really desire, what drives me, what are my personality traits, what are my strengths, weaknesses, what am I drawn towards, and then from there working towards, okay, well, in parkour, for example, how can I express myself and how can I dig into myself in these regards? But that's fundamentally based for me on then like certain things. And if I want to do, like a good example would be, if I want to do a really good climb up, or I want to get better at my climb up, it makes sense to work things like grip strength, like traverse work or pull-ups, just in a general sense, get better at them and then link them back into the whole. And so for me, the building blocks are like, okay, do I feel safe, confident in X? Do I then have a certain skill level in X? Once those building blocks are set, then I can then start to express nuances. It's like Picasso is a perfect example here. It's like he went through the stages of being confident and being safe in the kind of like realism realm, like making things look like a photograph. He learned perspectives, he learned X, Y, and Z, And then, and only then, after he'd mastered that, did he then go, now I can break the rules. And that was his individual expression. You know what I mean? He didn't just go in there first day and go, I don't want to draw the nose in the middle, I want to draw it on the side of the face. Does that make sense?
And that became his style, right?
Exactly. But there was a certain kind of like, for example, the single line drawings that he was doing. He was very constrained by that goal. He had like the start of the line, he'd explore, and the end of the line, which is kind of like parkour talk, right? But what he expressed in that line was an unimaginably detailed face with a facial expression, with an individual passion within that face. But it's just one line that he went. But he couldn't have done that without this kind of like base building blocks of kind of feeling confident in himself and then having a high level of skill to then express that. So these for me are like big building blocks that we rightfully should be training to do in order to then express ourselves.
This leads me perfectly onto one of the questions that I had, actually, because I know that you've kind of, correct me if I'm wrong, you're kind of coming into the parkour world. You didn't really start in the parkour world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so one of the questions I had in mind was, do you think that there's value in people actually, if they want to get into parkour, maybe they shouldn't just go headlong into it. Maybe they should go into, sorry, a loose term, but like movement culture practices. Maybe, do you think there's value in like doing all that first and then going to parkour, or what do you think? Because I know, for example, two really good friends who are exceptional parkour practitioners now, Dean Stimpson and Jordan Tyler Lee. They both were quite high level gymnasts together. People like Ed Scott, Tim Champion, pretty sure they were gymnasts together, or maybe not together, but you know they were high level gymnasts. And I just wonder whether there's similarity here in what you're talking about, in like get those building blocks first so that then you can play. Does that make sense? What do you think?
Yeah, for sure. I think there is no single rule. I'm going to say this is what you should do, because it's not the case. I would say the more tools you have, the better. And that means, if you can draw on breakdancing or gymnastics or whatever it might be, there's going to be many opportunities to use that in parkour. However, also then having a fundamental base of, like, for me, I did a lot of Olympic lifting before in the past, a lot of like kind of strength work, and so I have like some capacity in myself that means that I feel confident in jumping around and taking impacts, because I think I have enough robustness, you could say, and I think that's beneficial for some people. But again, not everyone. If you look at some guys that are moving around and they're just like cats, if they were heavier and bulkier, it would be less quality there. So it's not a steadfast rule here. I'd say the biggest thing we can draw on from this conversation is going back to this idea of belief system, and it's whatever the person has at their disposal that brings them the strongest sense of belief in that thing will be the best thing for them, because they're going to continue to do it. So if this person, has no access to a gym and has no access to guided coaching, let's say, in regards to strength training, but they've got a bunch of friends that they love, they spend time with, and they go out to train parkour 3 or 4 times a week, telling them to go to the gym and train strength training will be the worst thing. But if they can have a support bubble where it's like, oh, you know what, actually, I want to go do some strength training, and we're going to do like a 2-month, 3-month period where we're going to focus on capacity in order to then take it into the outdoor arena to then explore parkour again. This is a smart way of training if it's supported and if it resonates with the individual. And for me, I think if I can say something about what I'm trying to teach, it's very much I'm trying to guide the person on their own path. What do they resonate with? What are they inspired by? What are they drawn towards? And I then use my experiences to help that. I don't want to say, oh, you want to do parkour? Okay, you have to do this first. I have certain ideas from my philosophy why I think this X, Y, and Z is better, but I'm not going to impose that on you without first conversing over what you're drawn towards and what's at your disposal and what's around you. Does that make sense? You know? So it's kind of a non-answer to your question, but I think it's an important one to nuance. I don't think it's a like you could take your 3 favorite freerunners or parkour athletes, and each of them probably has a vastly different history. Like you've got young parkour athletes right now that have probably only ever done parkour, never done any strength training, never done any other sports, but they're amazing. Like the fat guys in London, for example, I'm pretty sure they're like 19, 20 years old, 10 years of parkour already. Whereas you referenced the other guys, Ed Scott, for example. I think he's ex-gymnast, whatever. Maybe 5-10 years of gymnastics before parkour, also amazing. Which one's better? Who knows? Depends. I was looking at this guy Pedro Thomas yesterday on YouTube, like mind-blowing. I won't comment on what his history is because I don't know, but I know he's doing a lot of amazing things.
Yeah, I actually I was talking to so my second podcast with this project was with a good friend called Dom from Norway, and he's spent some time with Pedro, and he was we were talking about Pedro in that podcast, and Pedro visited Norway a few times, which is interesting. I've been a big fan of Pedro for a long time, and similar to Ilabaca, I think that there's like a real link between those guys and their movement. I feel like in some way.
I'd add Matt McCreary into that bracket as well. So it's like open freedom, you could say. There's a hell of a lot of space when they're moving. It's like they're open to many options, and I mean that both physically and also kind of like emotionally. That they're really open to what's going to happen. Who's this Jannis Schauuer? This kind of idea of like it's very much. I haven't planned exactly what's going to happen, and I don't know what exactly is going to happen, and I'm fine with that, and I can react and I can express myself from that point, and that's absolutely fine. I think that's so amazing. It's so wonderful.
Yeah, and it seems to be a common thread with the very best practitioners. They seem to be able to, like you said, they be able to react and kind of adapt in the moment and have the space to
to improvise. I think this is very real, very 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 relevant to human life. I'd say the other end of the scale is people that are performative. They are the ones that can plan exactly what's going to happen and then do that exactly how they want it to happen. And this is more like a performance for me. It's almost like, okay, the crowd, the people watching, they expect this, and I'm going to deliver. And I need this to happen. You know, this is like a competition style. This is like a, you know, if you take a dancer and you have a dancer that's simply improvising by themselves in a room and they're going through X, Y, and Z, it's completely different to them going on stage and repeating a choreography. Now, I'm not saying either one's better or worse, but I'm saying it's very different. As an open expression and allowing things to unfold as they do, and remembering and repeating and doing the exact thing over and over again. For me, like what I'm working on right now is like trying to find the balance between the two, because I think open improvisation can be incredibly scary and intimidating, and there's many things that can hinder us there. But there's also kind of a lack or a limitation to just repeating things over and over again, doing the same thing over and over. So I'm creating this, like, trying to create this ability, this idea of sketching. And me and Flynn have both kind of come to a similar stand here of like taking like an internal desire and saying, this, I'm drawn into this right now. Whatever, you know, you find an environment and you see, I don't know, you see whatever it is and you do a movement from it, to it, on it, whatever it might be. This is what drew me in right now. Cool. That's your spark, that's your focal point of this sketch. And then you kind of just play around with it, you do it and then see what comes after it, you go into it from a certain, you enter it from a different way. and you just kind of explore that as your spark, and then you iterate from there, and you very much just sketch out ideas. Kind of talking from my language point of view here, my design degree point of view here, and you keep tracing on top of each of it, and then you smooth out the edges, you find a bit more space in it, you find a bit more calmness, you find a bit more, this was nice, that was cool, that flowed really interestingly, it felt really interesting, now I'm drawn towards that area. And then from these iterations you can then start to find this kind of like flowing exploration of the space from that initial spark, and that sketch then becomes a really nice process of figuring things out of your own, let's say, intuition. And you can make that as perfect or as imperfect as you want. For me, sometimes I like to then go into that kind of performative side of things and really like make it as solid and as seamless as possible, which is very much like parkour Instagram culture. It's nice to show a clip of like, I planned this and this happened, and then I performed it perfectly. But also on the other side of things, it's very nice to say, I was kind of doing this sketch, and I started like this, and I was really drawn towards that movement, but then that led me into this, and next thing I knew I was over there. That's also cool. Is there, right or wrong? I'd say no. I'd say they both have their standpoint, they both have their value. But getting caught in only one is maybe not so good.
Yeah, this reminds me of something that I do see in parkour. Maybe you could say parkour Instagram culture. Maybe maybe they're together now. But people put some kind of descriptions. I was trying this run, didn't quite get it how I wanted, but here you go anyway, sort of thing. And I think that plays into this idea of rigidity that you're kind of talking about. I think a lot of parkour people, they do want to have this perfect thing, this perfect product, you could say, of like their own movement. It's understandable why, you want to make something clean and finished in a way, like a product. But at the same time, maybe it does. Maybe people that kind of are quite rigid in this thinking are shutting the doors to more experimentation, more adaptability. I was talking to Flynn the other day about an idea for like a like a spontaneous, like a spontaneity type video where I'm just like, I've got a blindfold on and someone puts me in Nova City, for example, or another like big spot, you could say, or maybe even a small spot. Anyway, and just basically puts me somewhere, and then the blindfold comes off, and you just have to move for like 30 seconds. And that's the challenge in itself. Can you move spontaneously for 30 seconds? And I wonder what would come out of that, because I don't really see people trying this that much. They figure things out, they find what works, they link things together, they clean it all up like a product. But yeah, I want to, it'd be so nice to kind of get into this like spontaneous way of training, because I've been training for so long now. Like it'd be awesome to just see if I can just switch on, like this, like Bruce Lee says, just when it's just there. It'd be awesome to like experiment with that.
Yeah, it's such a valuable thing. Me and Flynn do a lot of kind of like, even like as a warm-up, for example, just kind of bopping around the place, exploring, seeing what's there, marking things out, moving in certain ways. Okay, what's there? I think just to go back to your previous point, like we suffer from expectation. I think humans, the biggest problem that we have is that, myself for sure included, we set certain expectations because we're conscious enough to foresee things, but then we also suffer for that because you take this kind of idea of Instagram culture, or a prime example, the last week even I made myself suffer because I expected a certain outcome from what I was doing, and I couldn't make that happen. I couldn't put some pieces together, and therefore I was disappointed with something that was actually really lovely, but I was like, yeah, it's nice, but it's not what I wanted to do. And there's an interesting disparity there, because I don't think one is either right or wrong, and just one sits on the other side of the barometer, like we said before. But yeah, this idea of spontaneity is really lovely. But in order for that to be pushed forwards and accepted and enjoyed, there has to be a level of different expectations or lower expectations, because you cannot have the same expectation of crisp, clean perfection if you're simply in the moment going from one thing to another. So some of the orientations that we look at in for example, like what I'm teaching microbatics and dance is continuity and connectivity. Are we able to continue and feel one thing flowing into another, and how maybe if I'm rotating, so if you're rotating, let's say to the right hand shoulder, can you keep a sense of continuity or continuation or connectivity to that and then move in that way? Or you have a choice of, let's say, that you could call that kind of angular momentum, this idea of, okay, I'm going in this curve, I'm going to continue going in this curve, and it's spiraling. Or there could be a sense of, I want to continue here, then also go here, then go here, da, 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 da. As long as there's some sense of like rhythm or connectedness from one thing to another, it aesthetically pleases, and it's quite a nice thing to do, and it might feel nice and spontaneous. I kind of lost where I was because we lost the connection. Sorry, but no worries. We can patch that up.
Yeah, no problem.
Regarding the expectations thing, I think it's, one of the problems we have to deal with in society right now is we're not really geared towards considering such a big reach of certain things. Like some of these guys are getting hundreds of thousands of views on a clip that's like 30 seconds long. It's like, how can someone comprehend that? A small human. And then, of course, the expectation is, I need to make it really good because there's going to be so many people that see this. We know you just have to think about that.
I'm going to slightly change the vibe a little bit.
Cool. We've been bouncing around all over the place.
No, I love it, man. This is exactly what I wanted. It's so brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. But looking at kind of more specifically, like in a coaching context, do you teach children much, or younger people?
Yeah, I started off actually when I was 16, 17, 18. I worked in an after school club, after school, to earn some money, and I was teaching is not the right term. I think especially with young children, it's very much not about teaching, but kind of facilitating and just like caring for, you could say, and just being with the children. And then I also went and I taught swimming in a summer camp in America for a summer when I was 20. And I was a nanny for a time in that period as well. So I really love kids. I spent a fair bit of time with kids. I class myself as a giant child to some extent. And I think Flynn could attest to that. But actually, currently, no. It's something that's on the cards, especially with London Movement Group. It's a perfect platform to share with younger people. But I think resource management is really important. I'm already doing a few different things, and it's really hard to kind of spread yourself. It's really easy, to spread yourself too thin.
The reason I ask is because I mainly teach children. I actually don't teach as many adults as I would like, but at the same time, I'm so used to teaching children now that I sometimes find it harder now teaching older people, which is strange. I never thought that would happen, but my sort of question I had in mind was, we've talked about stillness, well, not necessarily stillness, but we've talked about calmness and movement, offering space for kind of style, adaptability, these sort of things. How do we, for younger people, how do we make concepts like stillness and calmness and patience like palatable? Because kids are clearly very excitable and very energetic. And how do we start laying down these foundations for like future excellence, you could say? How do we make these things
It's a really great
palatable?
question.
Palatable.
I think this is actually a good question for our conversation, because I can kind of lean on this idea of belief system again, and I think, children are obviously very emotionally driven, and they can't inhibit that all too well. But that also works to your advantage, because if you can create images or games or tasks that the details of that they encompass quite a complex thing, for example, calmness or stillness, but they don't know that. They just focused on the what's going on and their drive towards that. Then you're gonna, I think, get some really nice outcomes. For example, you mentioned earlier the floor is lava. That's a certain kind of explorative game of working at height, for example, or whatever it might be. But there could also be something, making one up off the top of my head, maybe the silent game. Like my granddad and me used to play a game where I had to sneak up to a tree behind him without him hearing me, and he wouldn't be looking at me, but as soon as he heard me, he'd turn around and chase me. So there's a certain level of kind of calm, kind of stalking going on. Even something like this in the parkour realm could be a really interesting way of allowing children to move with a sense of stealth, which could be considered more calm, maybe, or more soft. I think sound is a good dictator of how in control someone is. Less so in parkour when there's certain things you cannot do quietly. Punch front, Kong, for example. There's certain things that maybe would be quite hard to really do, and it's quite nice to have those sounds, and I think that's a nice thing with parkour. But with regards to children and kind of curating certain qualities, these ideas of imagery, encompassing more information than we can comprehend in one thing, I think that would be a really big thing. I used to think a lot there, I'm sorry.
Don't apologise. It's just all, like trying to get it all out of your brain, and we're just exploring, aren't we? We're just exploring with different words and things. It seems it definitely is. Yeah, we're definitely getting at a common thread here in this like belief system idea and this kind of projection of like imagery and stuff. So that's going to give me a lot to think about. In terms of stealth, I think that's a really good point actually, because kids actually really love being sneaky, being stealthy. We play a game which I call Metal Gear Solid, but they are, of course, have no idea what that means. I hope I don't get any angry parents. But anyway, we play Metal Gear Solid, and basically me and my assistant coach have to kind of walk as security guards in a very set pattern, and they're all huddled over in a corner somewhere, all like eagerly looking, and we've just put like treasure everywhere across like the whole kind of course. And me and my assistant coach put our hands like this, so for people listening, like hands either side of our eyes, so that we can only see in a certain and we have to like walk, and if we see someone, we've got to go like, hey, and like then they have to go back and go back to the prison or whatever. And they really, really enjoy it, but it's interesting seeing how much focus they have when they are allowed to be sneaky and allowed to be stealthy, but then also they're doing loads of floor movement without us telling you have to move like this, because they're crouching, they're rolling, they're looking, they think they're convicts or spies, or however you want to say it, and they really get a thrill from that. So I'm trying to, in my own coaching practice, I'm trying to think more and more of like trying to think of more and more of these types of games and how we can, because children's attention or the student's attention in any circumstance is like, that's kind of the putty that's being molded, right? Like that's like the golden stuff. Like once you have someone's attention, then they can learn. Like without that attention, they can't learn as well. And so I'm kind of going off on a random one, but just my thoughts with kids teaching.
keep exploring that. It's good. Yeah, I think the attention is a valuable thing to say there. It's maybe you could also say an invested interest, something where they're really drawn into it, which kind of comes from an internal place. Then if they believe in something, if they're interested in something, if their attention's drawn to something, then that's exactly what we're looking for. They're then going to have this kind of like, I'm intrinsically drawn to this thing or to do this, and I want to do this now, and that's great. Rather than, that's so cool. My buddy said that was something I should do.
Yeah. I realise we're stretching over an hour now. I won't keep you forever because I know that you're keen to get out.
And the sun's shining on my face, ready for me.
Yeah, I noticed that. It looks like it's inviting you. So yeah, to kind of round up then, I wanted to ask you about your kind of, well, first of all, for you to you can plug your own coaching, and I want to know where people can find you and stuff like that. That'd be great if you could tell people, and also kind of what your kind of aspirations are. Like, where is this going? Is it going to a certain place? Are there things that you have in mind? Is there people that you particularly want to target or challenge, or what? Yeah, hey, the floor is yours. I want to know about the future of Wil Brown.
That's a wonderful open question. So first of all, you can find me on my website, which is called figuringthingsout.com. I try and keep that updated as much as possible, and I try and really list kind of writing that I like to do, past and previous, and also current. I have like an ideas page where I just put ideas on there, and photography, for example. I mainly teach online. I work with a bunch of 12 people at one time. I very much enjoy that. I really value this kind of like deeper connection with the individual. I don't rate so much the kind of, you buy my course and never speak to me again mentality. Of course, it has its kind of scaling value for business. That's undeniable. But I very much like this idea of like really getting to know someone, digging into the individual human they are, and all of the complexities that brings with it. Because I don't think it's an ABC world. I really don't think that is an ABC type. I'm not an ABC coach. I'm very much not. You didn't work hard enough if you didn't adapt. There's so much in life that can happen, and I really try and allow my students space to say, you know what, Will, I really struggle because of X, Y, and Z. I'm like, amazing, let's talk about it. So that's my online stuff. It's kind of under the broad scope of adventure, move, grow. It's something I termed years ago that I was just like traveling around and adventuring and moving and trying to focus on kind of like growing within myself. Also, you can find it on the website. I teach a London movement group, founded that a few years ago, under the pretense of kind of sharing. I loved, this idea of people, culture, and I wanted to start to share my work with them. There wasn't much of a pretense of I want to share X, Y, and Z. It's very much, it's open. I want to keep the name very arbitrary, very general, the same as figuring things out. I don't want to tie myself into only being able to teach handstands for the rest of my life. I very much want to teach a broad range of things that inspires me and that I think is valuable. And the group is very special to me. I really love it. I think it's an amazing thing. It's I really miss it right now. We're in the pandemic, so I can't teach them. But yeah, we do that, and I got some wonderful people there that have been with me for the last few years, and the community continues to grow, and I'm really looking forward to getting back to that as soon as we're allowed. Also got a few people that are going to be teaching with me on that. Started to kind of bring some other people on, which is great. Where would I like to go? I mean, you mentioned the kid option. That's obviously one that's at the forefront of my mind. I've definitely been debating that, and pre-corona that was on the cards with the group, but post-corona we'll see. I definitely want to be a bit more explorative. I really kind of 3 years ago I was very much kind of traveling the world, doing my thing, didn't really have any responsibilities, and I realized that this wasn't a very good thing for me. my orientation is very much family oriented. I want to have a family one day, and having no responsibility is not a good thing if you're trying to prepare for a family. And so I decided to move to London and set up the group and start really working on like putting things in place for myself. But I've got to the point now where I've done that, and I also want to reopen myself to traveling a bit more and meeting new people and kind of sharing my work in new ways. I really desire to teach more workshops and kind of like be in that space of not just teaching classes, but also kind of longer format workshops in different ways in different worlds. I did a lot of this when I was living in Germany when I was 22, 23, and I travelled with a group called More Vision, and we did a big kind of summer tour. We travelled around Germany and taught workshops, and then I really enjoy this format. I've done a few intensives of my own, and this for me is a really amazing way to kind of dive into something and spend a good amount of time with a group of people and dive into certain things, and it's a really nice way of doing things that you can't do in a 1 or 2 hour class. So I'd say that's more my orientation. And then I'm currently beginning work on a project with a dear friend of mine, Neil Tiesner, on the topic of learning itself, and we're hoping to bring that out sometime this year. It's been delayed because of Corona again, but yeah, we'll see.
Cool. Excellent. Well, for those listening or watching, you can find all the links for Wil Brown's work and his website and all those things above on Spotify and below on YouTube. If you're listening on Spotify, you can roll on to the next podcast, nice and easy, which was with Angus Ewan, who is a level 1 qualified practitioner, parkour practitioner from the South Coast. So yeah, especially any level 2s listening who need more assistance, like this. I'm trying to build a roster of lots of level 1s and hear from them, because they're just getting into a journey and they're just kind of finding their way. And I hope that level 2 people can snap them up and just like really give them a boost in their coaching and potential career. So Wil, that was a great pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I'll certainly be listening to that carefully again. So thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you so much, Sam. It was a real pleasure. I really enjoyed it. Thank you, mate.
Awesome. Hopefully it won't be too long till we meet up and have a good old session together.
Yeah, it'd be great.
It'd be good fun.
Yes. And also with little James as well.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you everyone for listening. We will see you on the next one. Bye from me.
Thank you very much, bud.